afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'll be giving you a presentation on automation in agriculture. Again, my name is Kyle T. Ruark. This is for Xavier University, Info 550. So today I'll be going over the agenda real quick. First, we're going to go over the definitions of automation in agriculture to get an idea of what we're working with. Next, I'm going to be covering some examples of agriculture automation. Our first item will be Blue River technology, which is a new type of weed control that farmers are utilizing. The second will be robotic agriculture drones. Third will be texting cows, with the technology now being utilized in the US and the UK called moo-call. And the last piece of technology we'll be covering are automated tractors. And then we'll be covering future of farming questions, and then I'll real quickly show you guys my references. So to start with our definitions here, the history of these items, the term automation was first recorded around 1945 to 1950. And this was through a combination of automatic and operation that created automation. The definition of automation is the technique, method, or system of operating or controlling a process by highly automatic means, as by electronic devices, reducing human intervention to a minimum. The definition of agriculture is the science, art, or occupation concerned with cultivating land, raising crops, feeding, breeding, and raising livestock. So some quick statistics in agriculture that I found very interesting when I began researching this. By 2050, the demand of food from farming will need to increase 70% in order to feed the population. By 2030, we're going to have 653 million people will be undernourished. And going off our first statistic here, we're expected to have 2.2 billion in population growth by 2050. Investments required to end hunger by 2030 would amount to $265 billion. And globally, 33%, that's 1/3 of the world's farmland, is moderately to highly degraded. So again, looking at these statistics, it doesn't seem like we're in a good spot right now with agriculture for our future populations, for your family, your kids, your children. This is kind of how we've set this up for them. So the first type of technology here that I wanted to cover that I found very interesting was Blue River technology. This is a type of weed control. And again, weeds are responsible for roughly $43 billion in financial losses for farmers. So what this technology does here, by the pictures you can see in the bottom left, is as a tractor is pulling this technology behind and throughout the crops, it is taking pictures of the crops and of any other items that are in its path. And if this is something that you have programmed it to identify as a plant, such as corn, such as peas, whatever you're going in the field, it'll take a picture of it and identify it as not a weed. And if it does identify it as a weed, it'll essentially highlight it red, and it'll actually target it and spray that weed. So you can see in the bottom right where these things are taking pictures and then spraying only the weeds. So by only spraying these weeds and not having to spray your entire field, the farmers are saving 90% of their spray by only targeting the weeds. Now what these things utilize is a photo database. So essentially when this piece of technology takes the picture, it runs it through its database to see if it's a weed or not. And if it is, it targets it. So this is basically an instantaneous thing that happens. And again, next thing I'll cover here is robotic agro drones. So a lot of us have seen drones for photography, for people selling their houses. These drones are utilized for a number of things. What I found was interesting are how farmers are now utilizing these drones. So to start, you can provide aerial imaging of terrain. So this is instantaneous. Sometimes you can actually, there's a lot of websites out there to allow you to submit for satellite imaging, and sometimes the satellite imaging can take up to 14 days to get to the farmer. So if they need to see something real quick in their fields, they can throw a drone up in the air and see it right away. And while it's up there, they're able to identify and target specific areas for different levels of fertilizer. So different areas of the field may be struggling more than others, and they're actually able to see this quickly and fix it. You're able to upload maps and thermal imaging data to the cloud. I will show you this here in the next slide. So they're essentially able to take pictures and store this and then submit it to possibly someone who's more familiar with agriculture than they are, than the farmers, and they can get recommendations off of it. This is actually able to identify target specific weeds. Again, this is not as in-depth. It's not as in-depth analysis of the previous technology I showed you. This is essentially taking a picture to see if you have one individual plant that might be overrunning the rest of the field. And again, with the capability of doing this instantaneously, it can save time and money. You don't have to actually ride out into your fields to damage any crops on there. And lastly, these do run on rechargeable batteries. There's no need to stop and refuel the tractors, to your ATV, your dune buggy, whatever it is you're riding out to your fields. And again, here's a quick picture of some imaging for the drone. They're able to fly up in the air fairly high and get take some pictures and figure out what fields are doing well. You can determine your best crop yield locations to see if certain areas are doing better than others. Again, on the picture on the right, you can see in the bottom right is actually doing better than the rest. So maybe they need to add some more fertilizer into the rest of the fields. You're able to break out your land based on acreage to determine your estimated crop yield. So based off this, the farmer is expected to, let's say, generate $100,000 worth of revenue for himself. And then he's also able to determine the required amount of seeding. So if there's no seeding in this field, he's actually going to take the aerial imaging, provide the calculations based off it, and get some estimated sizes to go out and actually purchase the seed to plant. This next technology that I came across here that was very interesting, that provided a lot of information that was being pushed to the farmers. So this is called MooCall, and when I looked this up, everything kept coming across as texting cows. And I thought, how are cows texting the farmer? I thought this was very interesting. So essentially, these are devices, as you can see in the top right there, that they'll either attach to the ear, the neck, and they can actually wrap it around the tail. And what these actually do is provide some sensors to notify they typically notify up to two people. So it can usually be the farmer, possibly his son or his wife, or whoever else is helping to run the farm, to provide statistics on the cows that might be in heat, that might be birthing, and then possibly medical sensors. So the heat sensors will actually identify when a female cow is going into heat to notify the farmer to help prepare another cow to keep the herd going. The birthing sensors, so essentially you're not going to know when the cow is going into labor, and this will actually notify the farmer via a text message on his app, and an email, and even a phone call. And lastly, medical sensors. These will basically send notifications to the farmer to identify if a heart rate is too low or too high, or there's anything that might be required to keep the livestock in good condition. The last technology here, we've probably seen a lot of this on the road recently, are automated tractors. We've seen Teslas, we've seen a lot of the self-driving cars, and I kind of think, well, why don't we throw this into a cornfield and have it, harvest crops for us? So there is a huge lack of labor currently hitting the agriculture market. A lot of farmers don't have the people necessary to go out and pick their crops, whether it be strawberries, whether it be apples, you name it, there's usually a lack of labor, and these tractors can obviously fix that. The next part about these items is the farmers are now able to seed, fertilize, and spray and harvest 24/7 without involvement or stopping to fuel vehicles. So even while you're sleeping, these things can be out like a Roomba in your field, picking crops, seeding, fertilizing, you name it. They're able to go out and take care of the things that we are unable to do, being human and having to stop, rest, eat. All they have to do is come back and recharge. There's a downside to some of this technology. It's very expensive right now. So obviously with the new technology, this will be very expensive, but as time goes on, these will be getting cheaper and cheaper. And there was a quote I found here that's basically saying, we need to bring technology and agriculture together so we can set the tone in the development of autonomous farming and bring products to the market faster. So again, there's not a lot of resources providing research into automated tractors like there are into Tesla's automatic driving capabilities. It doesn't get the same type of press. There's not as many people interested in it. So naturally, there's just not going to be as much funding as you would expect. And a good question I had here that I thought was kind of interesting is, can farmers solely rely on autonomous vehicles for their crop yields for the year? Farmers survive every year off their crops. It's not something that if if something happens with the vehicle, it doesn't do something right, or doesn't plant properly, or fertilize properly. If you want something done, you have to do it yourself. So it seems difficult to turn this type of trust over to a technology that is not fully developed yet. So this is kind of a depiction of future farms. Again, they're going to be very small and smart. So again, we've covered the survey drones up top here that are able to fly up and take pictures and provide these datas and maps to kind of see what's out there, what kind of weeds are out there. Where do you need to target most of your fertilizer, your seeding, whatever the case may be. So the next item they're going to have are the agrobots that we kind of covered. These are able to kind of go around and pick the crops, provide some fertilizer, and actually lower the fertilizer cost. That's going back to the Blue River technology. These things are going to be basically automatic. They're going to go around and do all the work for you, and you're not going to have to do much with it. Next is the smart tractors. We've gone over that too. It's going to be the GPS ones. You basically plan a route in there, and you can have it go line from line. It's actually going to save you time. It's going to save you money. You're able to target areas specifically, so you're not double planting in certain areas. Contrary to the person who's driving that, he might have the same area twice, and now you have two seeds next to each other as opposed to one seed, and now you're wasting money. The texting cows we covered as well. These will be sending data back to the farmer that he's able to see and provide some action on if necessary. And then lastly, you've got the farmer sitting back in his office. This is something that the future will happen eventually here, and these farmers won't even have to go outside for most of the time. They'll basically be sitting back, looking at their iPad, looking at their Microsoft Surface, looking at the reports that are being generated from the rest of their farm, and kind of identify what action they need to take. And this is going to obviously become it's going to be a different lifestyle for them. When you ask farmers, they're very hands-on. They're always out getting stuff. They're always, going to the store to pick up something else, taking care of the herd, taking care of the crops, planting, seeding, you name it. They are very busy people. So basically it's coming down to what does he do with this information? So he has all this data now that he's acquiring based off his land, based off his herd, based off his drones, how much crops he's got, how many weeds are in his field, what types of weeds are in his field. And that kind of brings me into my questions for the class here. So the first question I've got here is what role does a big data play in smart farming, and how can this information be managed? Should this be managed by the farmer himself or someone larger such as IBM? The next question is how will this affect a farmer's structured workforce, his current processes, and agricultural research? Obviously, farmers now are getting a lot of their actions based off previous years' crop yields, based off what tractor is working better for them. How is this going to affect them with the new technology? And lastly, as a society, are we going to be able to keep up with the expansion of the human population without switching over to automation in agriculture? And why is that? This is the question I'd like to focus most of this week's discussion on, because I find this very interesting. We've got a lot of new technology that's being worked on, such as meat made in petri dishes and vertical farming and having these massive facilities for hydroponics. There's a lot out there. Do you think we will be able to survive and maintain this population without switching over to a fully automated agricultural system? And that is all I have for the class. Again, lastly, here are some of my references in case you'd like to look them up. Again, feel free to reach out if you'd like any more statistics on any of this. The third reference here on smart agriculture is where I found most of the statistics. So if you've got any desire to look at those, I found a lot of them fascinating. Feel free. And again, this has been a great class. I look forward to hearing you guys' discussion. Thank you.